Jeff Skoll, how many people know him? Yeah, so he's the first president of eBay. And just before it went public, he took his stock, put it in a foundation worth $2 billion today, basically to help people like you realize the dream of the initiatives that you would like to take, to the extent that it would actually improve the lives of others. And that's, in simple terms, the definition of social entrepreneurship. It's an initiative that has an impact on the community of people in need. It can be in health, it can be in education, it can be in alleviating human suffering, equal human rights. One of the women that I met actually was in jail in the Philippines when her son was born. And she was actually trying to stop young girls, 10, 12 years old, from becoming sex workers. So her son was actually born because she was raped in jail. And I asked him, how was it like to actually grow up in jail? He said it was awesome. Beyond the wall, there was a tree. And I dreamed of the day I'll go out and climb it, which he did. And then he became like you, and I'm an activist today, basically working on preventing other girls from being victims, if you will, to the traffickers. I'm going to leave here the program for the Skoll Word Forum so that you can actually just look at it if you wish. You can, of course, go to the website. And also here a book written about a woman who went to study African languages and ended up discovering astonishing things that happen, for example, in the Senegal, because of rituals, and in particular for women. And I asked her how did it all start, and started reading the book. She said, people believe that God created one man and one woman, and then he asked the woman first, what would you like to be? She said, I would like to be the master of the universe. So that's great, you are, which means you're going to have to produce people. You're going to have to bear children and what have you. And then you have to serve them. And then they asked the man, and what would you like to be? And he said, I would like to be the master of the woman. And it is that, if you will, self-assignment of roles that now they're trying to teach to the young generation. You are here to serve, and you are the master. How about that? Sounds pretty good, right? My name is Osama Hassanein. I'm the chairman of Takwadi. We are a mentorship organization. We focus mainly on helping young entrepreneurs learn what they need to do to make their enterprise and their initiative successful. Sometimes by bringing them here for acceleration program, like the one that you're in today, but it can be longer. So instead of a week, it can sometimes be a month or 3 months. We help them in angel financing. We help them in sometimes winning competition. One simple example, Hind Hobika, how many know her? She's 22 years old. And I was in a hotel at the end of a very short trip in Doha when she called me in my hotel room, and she said, I attended a lecture and I wanted to talk to you about an initiative. I have won a Stars of Science competition here in Doha, and I would like to know what next. I said, I'm sorry, I'm actually leaving tomorrow. I said, I'm in the lobby. So I went down, we sat down. And interestingly enough, within, I guess, half an hour, we were able to, by miracle, get her an OEM contract for her invention, which is a pulse meter that displays all the vital signs on goggles of Olympic swimmers. She has patented it, and somehow by sheer luck, calling a friend of mine here, he talked to Steve Tyre, who's an Olympic swimmer, and has a company that sells these goggles, actually, in Los Angeles. And he said, I would like to have your product incorporated in my goggle and sell it. So within half an hour, you had a business, actually. So we continued to Skype once a week until we got to the final of the MIT Arab Business Plan competition last year, which she won. When she came here and spent 6 weeks, she was able to secure all the funding she needed for her ventures. I'm going to leave you with this, but you can also go to the MIT Enterprise Forum, and it will tell you about the program this year, and it actually starts on Monday in Doha. 4 amazing days of hackathons and what have you. So with that in mind, I know how proud the organizers are, Khaled and Elliot and Misha, of you being here. They are very passionate about helping you achieve your dreams, and so are we. So we are all here to help, and as a consequence, please do not hesitate to reach. Today you're going to have one of the best days of your lives, and I promise that, and you tell me if at the end, if by noontime it's not the case. We have truly 5 amazing leaders here to help you address questions that you may have about what's going to happen in the next 12 months for any initiatives that you may have. I'm going to make one introduction, and then the rest is going to follow. About 30 years ago, I think many of us here were not born, right? Right. Dr. Bruce Bauer and I made an amazing investment in a company managed by the most obnoxious man you've ever met in your life. His name is Larry Ellison. He's the CEO of Oracle. It had become a $160 billion company. Of course, he and I had absolutely no idea. And we have been in venture capital ever since, managing 14 funds so far. He has, in addition to his general knowledge, a specialty in healthcare, and has created a number of spin-outs from within HP and so on and so forth that he can talk to you about. Has 2 amazing girls. They are your age. They go to Duke University and Harvard. I'm proud to be his friends, and he's going to be our first speaker, and he will introduce the rest. With that in mind, I wish you the very best. And I would say goodbye, and in Arabic, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And Osama, thank you for that kind introduction. As he said, we've been in business together for over 25 years. And sometimes it's nice to be reminded that we've managed to avoid becoming like an old married couple. And he can still find something nice to say about it. But I think we have a great program put together for you this morning. I'm delighted to be a part of it and to share the room with my co-presenters, Hassan and Nima and Mona and Salim. They are an extraordinarily successful group of investors, venture investors, and entrepreneurs. And I know you are going to enjoy hearing from them. Let me start out with a question, though. How many in here have ever tried to raise money or asked someone to give them money to go do something that they'd like? Okay, pretty good. If we include our parents in that question, probably everyone. All right. How many have actually succeeded in convincing somebody in a material way to part with money because of who you were and what you wanted to go do with it, and have been able to raise it? Okay, that's pretty good. Few left hands. It's not easy to do, is it? It's a real challenge. So what I'd like to do today, and it'll be a bit at a high level and a bit of a traditional venture perspective, is to talk about where can you go to find money. And it's really 4 places. How big are they? Who's who? What are the trends? How does it work? And we'll finish up with a few examples of some deals that Osama and I have been privileged to be a part of in our work together. But first, Osama wanted me to say a few things about myself and how I ended up in the venture business. And I think I took kind of a traditional pathway to get here. I spent a lot of time in school, much to the chagrin of my parents, who never thought I'd get done. But I did come out of Duke with a couple of engineering degrees, so I was a technology-oriented person. And like most people, I went into industry. And I did that in California, even though I was on the East Coast. And I spent a number of years gaining what turned out to be some extraordinary operating experience. And I started out in R&D, that morphed into business development, into marketing. I ran a sales force for a while. I was able to do that and appreciate a more holistic view of an operating company because I ended up at a firm called Diasonics, which was, and we're going back now, but back in the day was one of the darlings of Silicon Valley. It was a very high-profile, high-growth, premier venture-backed company. And we had a real big splashy IPO. Everybody wanted to be a part of it. And that was great, until it wasn't. And like some companies, things started to go south soon after the IPO, and so while I had all these wonderful experiences and knowledge on the way up, I also got a lot of experience on how to run a company on the way down during the turnaround challenges. So I ended up being recruited out of that environment into the world of finance, which was a huge shift, as you can imagine, to a firm in San Francisco, a venture firm, Berkeley International Capital, who from the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s, I will tell you, was one of the larger predominant sources of later stage mezzanine financing for technology companies in the US. And it's there that I met Osama. And as he said, the very first transaction that he and I collaborated on was this small software company, Oracle. That ended up beginning a string of very successful transactions that we did. And about 8 years later, I left with a couple of other partners and hung out our own shingle to do an early stage venture fund. We had always taken a very international approach to the business, so it wasn't unusual for us to set up our first fund actually in Israel. And so that very first fund, timing is everything. This was the mid-'90s. A lot of technology in Israel and not a lot of money yet. But we were right at the beginning of that. We started that with the notion of developing and forming financial companies, where in this example we would take technology that came from Israel, develop it there, but bring the senior management team, build that team here where the customers were. That ended up being a pretty good idea and a great success. So when we went to raise our next two funds, and this time under the brand of Newbury Ventures, we included not just Israel, but Europe and Canada as well. And we raised close to $250 million to do that, and it's been keeping us pretty busy ever since. A couple of winners out of that, Centillion and Zong, you see in the lower right, I'll talk about later as examples of what we were able to do. So what are the four areas? The first one, obviously most well-known, well understood, venture capital. This is a busy slide, but the takeaway really is very simple. How big is it? Well, depending on the survey you want to listen to, it's anywhere from $22 to $29 billion last year. So pretty substantial. And you can see that the dollars raised end up going disproportionately to a relatively few number of firms, although there's, again, you can, it's a moving target, 300, 400 venture firms that are active in early stage investing. It's a lot fewer than there were 10 years ago, but that's a moving target. It's big. To put this a little bit in perspective, in other regions, in Israel, this is a $2 billion business. In India, pretty big country, it's less than $1 billion. In the Middle East, 200 million. So a lot of room to grow. Who's active in it? You'll see a lot of names here that are household names almost. Sequoia, NEA, Kleiner Perkins. One of the things to note though on the right side, the fourth one down, Andreessen Horowitz, didn't even exist 5 years ago. So even in this industry, there's an opportunity for someone who's smart, with a good idea, and a great talent to go and build a very successful firm. Now, while this is probably the top 5%, there is another 95%. And maybe less than half to 40% of the winners come out of this group, the other 60% come out of everybody else. So while everyone looks at these names and says, gee, I want them, there are plenty of other firms with great general partners, with great investment strategies and money to invest that are very valuable to be approached. Where do you think these guys are so smart? Where do they put their money? All over the place? No. They put over half their money in only 2 locations. Software, broadly defined, like Randy, and everything healthcare. So fairly concentrated, actually. Second area, and this is a fickle one, are companies, industry venture groups, corporate ones. They invest when times are good, when times are bad. It's the first area to get cut. So look at the early 2000s, look at 2009, and you see that. The last 3 years, these guys have a lot of cash. So guess what they're doing? They're buying companies and they're investing in companies. And they're half again, it was $10 billion last year. Half the size of what all the venture guys did. So these people are active. Now, they often approach it with some kind of a strategic agenda. That's fair enough because they're looking to buy companies. So you see on the right in the technology sector, very active, acquisitive corporate programs. Google, the most active, and if you can imagine this, they are acquiring a company on average every 3 weeks. Wouldn't you like to work in business development there? Oh, and another point, this is a competitive business. And everybody's always looking for an edge. They want to see the best deal, they want to do the best deal. And there's a recent announcement which is interesting. You have 3 firms, Google Ventures, Kleiner Perkins, and Andreessen Horowitz. 3 top names. Well, guess what they've done? They have joined together in a little collaborative. It's called the Glass Collective. And they are jointly going to look at and fund young new companies who are developing hardware and software solutions to support the Google Glass platform. Now, that whole thing is going to sink or swim based on the success of Google Glass, but what a lock on that whole platform that represents. And you'd like to think that 3 firms of that stature wouldn't need to do that. But they didn't get where they are by being complacent. So everybody at any level is looking for an edge. Now, this source you probably have a lot of familiarity with, angel investors. Now, Saleema's going to speak a lot more about that, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, except last measure, it's pretty big, almost 200,000 people doing that. They invest, though, about the same amount as the venture guys do, 20 billion. So it's big, except in much smaller bite sizes. Whereas the venture people are doing 3,000-ish deals a year. These guys are doing 20 times more, 60,000. Now, they're called, obviously, friends, family, and fools. You hope that the last category doesn't intersect the other 2. And where do they put their money? Really, internet startups, healthcare, again, and mobile, a little bit more diverse. So this last category, the 4th one, is fascinating to me. It's the newest. Look at the growth from 2 years ago to last year, over 200%. It's amazing what this is developing into. 2 million people, almost 200 countries, over $300 million, 20,000 projects. And that's just last year. Now, Kickstarter, who is the most well-known source for crowdfunding, they've been around a few years longer, but up until now, they've done about, just by themselves, twice those numbers. And what else is amazing is it took them, Kickstarter, 2 years to grow to the same degree that it took Kiva 7 years to achieve. And Kiva is lending money. These guys are giving it away. Kiva was lending money originally. And they have a 99% payback rate. So where this goes over the next few years, I think is going to be amazing to watch and see how it develops. Most of the projects, I grant you, are arts and performance media oriented. But that said, it's a huge phenomenon that it'll be fascinating to watch. So how do we invest? How do people approach it? Let me pose this question to you. You all have gotten to know each other to some degree during this conference, who you are, what you're about, what your passions are, what you want to accomplish with your lives. If I said to you, you have the opportunity to take an equity stake in one of your fellow delegates. You could own 5% of what they accomplish in their life. How would you approach that decision on what to back, who to back, what to take equity in, and be a part of that one other delegate? What would be the criteria that you would hold first and foremost as important making that decision. Shot that, anyone? Yeah.
I mean, the first two things that come to mind is probability of success as like just based on external, maybe demographical or psychographical information, very P&G oriented. But also, I think more importantly, is on a very basic human level, do I trust that they actually, you know, are the medium is the message? Are they walking, talking, living, and breathing what they say they want to do?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Those are all people-centric attributes that you were looking at. Does the person have the passion? Does the person have the leadership? Does the person have the character that you think it will take for them to execute whatever challenge and meet whatever challenges get thrown at them? The people, the team, are the first and foremost consideration when you're looking at something new. The idea is important, but the people are more important. Do they have the passion? Do they have the character that it's going to take to succeed? And that's how we all approach it. We can take the same company with two different teams running it and have really different outcomes. Now, the idea is important. What is the strategic advantage of that idea? How defensible is it? There are a lot of smart people in the world. And believe me, your good idea is going to be shared by other smart people. So how are you going to be able to compete with them, differentiate yourself, not just today, but over the longer haul, and defend that position as time moves on? Very important to have that thought out and understand that. We also have to look at the size of these opportunities. How big are they? Does it matter? Can we move the needle? Does anyone really care? So that for us is also important. And a bit unique to us as well is we look at the global opportunity. We want to see if ideas and new ventures can be a success not just in one region, but in many regions. We like that as well. Now, how do we get involved? We're an early stage group. We love being at the table as early as possible. That helps set strategy, help define the team, find the money, put the capital structure together, find the partners. We roll up our sleeves, we're very hands-on. We like to do that, and we can do that because we get involved, and anybody that you would want to get involved with yourselves, you want to be sure that you choose people who are familiar with your space, who can bring their experience and expertise to the table, who can bring their relationships to the table and share their network with you. That's most important. And a little word on strategic partnerships. We believe in them very strongly. There was a quote in that video that Osama showed. One woman commented, it went something like, it's try not to start from a clean slate. The more you can do to accelerate yourself, you'll get to your destination faster. And that's what the right strategic partnerships can do. You can do them improperly, and they can be a problem. But if you do them right, they can give you an unfair competitive advantage, either on the technology side or on the marketing, sales, distribution side, into the marketplace. Leverage off the backside of the right partner, and you can really accelerate where you go and reduce the risk of getting it, which overall should result in a higher return. So, partnerships, they come in all shapes and sizes. And this is certainly applied more toward a traditional company. But you can look at universities, more on the technology side, corporates and their brands, mentorship programs like Tekwadi, and across these other locations. That's a very localized phenomenon. It's marvelous. You've probably heard of and familiar with Y Combinator, out here in the Middle East. Oasis 500 has been a pioneer in this concept, and they have mentored hundreds and hundreds of companies. And I think they have, I could get this wrong, but I think they've actually financed somewhere between 50 and 100 themselves. These are wonderful organizations. They provide a nurturing environment for a young team to get organized, to get their venture off the ground, and to see what they can create with it. It's fabulous. The downside, the risk with this, is that there's a disconnect for the vast majority of these ventures in graduating, if you will, and trying to find additional money, which now has to come from a more traditional venture-oriented investment base, and they can't find it. And so they don't have the fuel to continue to fund the venture over the longer haul. This is a huge problem in India. The numbers are so out of whack in terms of the companies that come into these programs and the ones that find money, on the back side. And so the reaction is, in India anyway, they are cutting way back on how many companies go into those programs and looking at much higher criteria in evaluating them to even join. So we are really fortunate, all of us here today, because we are living in a time of great promise. They say that the rising tide floats all boats, and if you're going to launch a boat, do it at the beginning of that tide. And I'll show you a few slides which sort of demonstrate that. And you love these plots that go from the bottom left to the top right. Just looking at smartphone sales. Over the next 6 years, there's going to be a 5x return, they say, or growth in the number of devices that are out there. Anything you do which leverages that kind of growth, if it happens, is going to have the wind at your back. Big data, right? Everybody's collecting more and more information about us every day. What does it mean? How can it be put to use? What kind of analytics are going to be there to understand all of that? That's going to double over the next 4 years, actually, as a growth, they say. Look at cloud computing, and where were we in 2009? It was nothing, and it's still quite a bit more today. But over the next 7 years, just in SaaS, they predict over $85 billion in growth in that industry. That's huge. And social media, we know only too well. Even here, it's going to grow 2 to 3 times in the next few years from where it is today. So let me give you a few case studies. That was all the future. This is a little bit of the past. The first company, Centillion, was a firm that we became aware of, actually it was a team that we became aware of because of our relationships with Hewlett-Packard. It was a bunch of engineers working away for a few years developing a new piece of software which was designed to provide better identity and access management for hospital information systems. So it would enable a doctor or a nurse to navigate their way through a whole bunch of patient records more quickly, more efficiently, and more securely. HP didn't think it was going to be aligned with their product roadmap, so the team wanted to pursue it on their own. We got involved very early. We did our due diligence. I was very comfortable with that team and what they could do, so I checked the box on the people part of that equation. From a strategic standpoint, they had developed an ecosystem of about 6 other HIT vendors. They had developed this in collaboration with Duke Medical Center. So we felt that they were, we were able to check that box. Very early stage, we got in. I sat down with the team and with the management of HP, and we actually negotiated the terms of that spin-out. And so we wrote a business plan. I found them the money, set the terms for everyone, and found the space, and we were off and running. Huge market. Every patient in every hospital would touch this. So we ended up, it took us longer than we would have liked, but along the way, strategic partnerships, we ended up with some great people like Tenant and HCA and Microsoft along the way, which sure enough developed into an exit roadmap for us. And a few years ago, Microsoft bought the company for $200 million. And it was a great success for everyone. And then today, what Microsoft offers as their core product in healthcare is from what they bought in this acquisition. Zong was a deal that Osama spearheaded. We had been an investor in a company called EchoBox based in Geneva for a number of years, and it was a premium SMS content service provider. provider. That business was becoming a bit controversial and shrinking a bit, but we saw some applications for that technology in mobile payments. So what do we do with that? Well, we really like the CEO, David Marcus, team in the middle of that picture. Very impressed with him. So we went and we took that technology and we spun it out of Echobox. And we moved David over here. We put him right in Silicon Valley, literally at the doorstep of his customers, in you and Facebook. We found the rest of the team, got the money together, and off to the races. Strategically, very important, they had, through Echobox, developed direct relationships with about 13 carriers in 30 countries. So that's not easy to do. And they had that as an asset when they started the company here. We did that in 2008, and within 3 years, we had an annual run rate of over $200 million in sales, and we ended up adding some money to the company, which opened the door to some relationship at PayPal, which eventually evolved. We hired an investment banker and managed that process to have the company acquired by eBay a couple years ago. What was it, 240 million or something. I think this picture was taken after that deal was announced, so someone's a very happy man. So the last example is a work in process. I'm actually finding that I'm spending about 3 to 4 months a year myself in India. And what I learned from my travels over there was a huge disconnect between the need and the supply for quality health care in that country. And I traced some of that to the quality of the people that are the healthcare providers themselves, the doctors, the nurses, the technicians, the other allied healthcare professionals. They're not coming out of their schools trained well enough to do their job efficiently, competently. A lot of that falls to the employers who do a terrible job of that themselves. And so I struck on the notion of coming up with a better solution that would provide postgraduate training, both hard skills, clinical skills, as well as soft skills, to all of these, both new graduate and existing healthcare professionals. I named the company Berkeley Health EDU. I stole the EDU from Google. At Berkeley, we needed a name that we would send the message of something connected to the U.S. and education, but really not stepping in anybody's toes. It's in Delhi. I pulled the trigger on this last September. And why did I do that? The thing that threw me over the edge, finally, it was a great idea and a great need, but I found the people. Through a couple of years of meeting everybody in the industry, I identified the right individuals who I thought had the skills, the reputation, and most importantly, the passion to make this work. And so I hired the first employee in September, and the other lesson, drive to revenues as quickly as possible. We had our first revenues December 1st, 3 months later. And since then, I found great partners in terms of my local investors. I raised $3 million for this thing. And we now have a beautiful facility in Delhi. We are the first to offer high-fidelity simulator training privately in the country. We've already trained a few hundred nurses, a few phlebotomists along the way, and our first doctor's course starts in 2 weeks. So it's very much a work in process. My goal here is to, over the next 5 to 10 years, be training literally tens of thousands of patients or students each year and spread this throughout the country. I'm already looking at opening up Bangalore sometime later in the year. So this is a work in process, but again, it comes down to have the right people. I think a defensible idea and how we execute it. Big market. And if it can work in India, I think it can work in Africa, it can work in Indonesia, it can work in a lot of other places that have the same issue. So what I'm hoping that you're able to come away with today is the knowledge that global ideas can come from anybody, anywhere. From any of you, from any of the countries where you live. It can even come from some old guy in Silicon Valley who wants to do something with you. And if you know how to go about it, partners, mentoring, and money are within your reach. That's what I hope you can take away from this today. Thanks. I don't know if we want to do questions now or hold to the end.
Questions now. What's your time?
Why don't we, I'll introduce Salim, the most famous angel investor. There you go. Thank you. Here.
So good morning and welcome to everybody. My name is Salim Jabbar. I'm from Lebanon. My parents are actually Palestinian, so I was born in Lebanon and grew up in Beirut. And then in '74, I was at the American University of Beirut studying, and the war started. I applied to some universities in the US, and I got no answer because there was no mail. And very late in the game, somebody told me, well, you should call and try and find out if you're accepted. So I did, and it turns out I was accepted at Yale. So I somehow got out, and I did my PhD at Yale. I'm a physicist by training, so I thought I would spend my life in universities, teaching and doing research, and I did. After Yale, I came to the University of Southern California, big change, and I taught there for a couple of years. I didn't really like too much the work or the academics. I went into industry in Los Angeles. I spent about 10 years working in aerospace, and then came up here to Stanford. Actually, I spent a little time, and I got into communications. So I started, well, then I worked for another company for a few years. Finally, I decided I don't like big companies. I want to work on my own. I want to start something. And so I did. I started going to the venture capital community in this area and tried to raise money. I failed, actually. I wasn't able to raise any money. I joined a small company which was willing to give me a piece of the company to join them and to start a new business in fiber optics. So we did that, and it grew, and it went public in the year 99 and got pretty big. And then I quit and started working with the venture community, sort of funding other companies. And that's what I'm still doing today, except now I'm doing the angel side of things. So let me, is this working? So I'm now part of this group. It's called Sandhill Angels, and basically we are a group that invests our own money into small companies to help them get started. So I will talk a little bit about how both VCs and angels look at companies in order to invest in them. It might help you to understand sort of the process and how things go on in this area. VCs focus on early stage companies, usually technology concentrated or focused on some kind of technology that are trying to get started, trying to raise some money. So what do angels do? So basically, more or less the same thing, except probably not as much focused on technology per se, but rather looking at it as a business. And of course, as I mentioned, we are investing our own money. I like to think about it that VCs are giving away someone else's money as if it was their own. We are giving away our own money as if it was someone else's money. As I go through this presentation, you'll get an idea about more differences between angels. And we'll keep this very informal, so stop me at any time and ask any questions, because I realize that you are mostly into social enterprise, and we will try and see how we connect the two together. So the process of looking at companies is a little bit like a big filter. You start with a whole bunch of companies that you look at, and there can be hundreds and thousands of them, and you start sort of weeding them down to try and see who might be successful. The first filter is sort of about the problem or the issue. Is there something that this company is going to be able to do? And this issue, of course, could be a technology issue, but it could also be a social issue. Is this a big market? Why are we so interested in big markets? Because we are taking so much risk and putting money. Only one out of maybe 100 companies is going to be really successful. So in order to generate or get back your investment, this company has to be able to grow quite large, and that means the market has to be large. The third filter is does this company have a technology or something different, something proprietary that can give them an advantage over other competitors? The fourth is there a scalable business model? And we'll talk about that idea of scalability. Is this the right time? And most importantly, is this the right team? That's probably one of the most important things that we look at. And I think you touched on that, Bruce, earlier a little bit, that the person and the team are probably one of the most important things. There's this book, if you're actually interested in this, 7 Steps to a Successful Startup, that you might be able to look at.
So when you talk about difference, then I mean the obvious example would be a different technology, but can you give an example of how it can be different in other ways?
Yes, I will get to that. So we're going to go through each one of those, and we'll address that. So first of all, is there a need? Is there something that needs to be solved? And the company that's coming to us has to convince us that there is indeed something that needs to be addressed. These can be ideas that you notice. I have somebody that's very interesting. He's from Saudi Arabia. He started this company called Hufra. And his idea is that he's driving around and he sees a pothole that needs to be fixed. Hufra, of course, is old. So he takes a picture with his phone, and then it goes on a map. So it shows on the map that there's a pothole in this location, and everybody can see it. And of course, hopefully the government or the city government will notice that, oh, there's all these potholes, and then go fix them. So I'll show you his a bit later. Problems can be so general. I mean, Square, you're all familiar with the company Square that made, it's a little hardware device that plugs into the phone, and then you can swipe a credit card through it. So it turns your phone into a little commercial sales point so that people can buy things from you. And so people that are selling sandwiches or whatever on a cart, they don't need to have a cash register or something. You can just use a phone, and people can swipe their credit card and buy things from them. So it has social implications. So this is an idea I want to come back to, that sometimes, a lot of the time, in fact, all the time, I think, starting a business has immediate social implications. Other things that I could mention, of course, we can talk about social issues. And here I'd like maybe to switch to that public demand thing. So this is a website, it's called Public Demand, where you can go and, what's the English word? Complain about a company or about a product. And so you go on there, you sign up, and you can try it out. So that's an example Now, how can this be a business? Well, there's many things that could happen. First, if you can attract a lot of people to come look at this, then you can maybe start advertising for more bad business. I don't know. So let's go back to the there's other issues, of course, that one can look at, like harassment, discrimination, violence. I put that word in yesterday after what happened. I think in the Middle East, especially, one of the worst things that if we could figure out a way of getting rid of is to get rid of violence. I think my whole life personally has been stamped by this whole, like the Lebanese Civil War that happened and went on for 20 years. And so I have a sort of a great sensitivity to violence. Why do we need to solve problems with violence? All right, so the market issue. So we talked a little bit about that. There's a lot of, you can buy reports from companies that do market research and they charge you a lot of money. But if you're trying to prove the size of a market, my advice is not to pay a lot of money for these things. Just go and look at newspapers, web blogs, publications, and you'll find a lot of information. And a lot of time when I was starting a company in the past, what I would do is go to the professional market research companies and say, sell me last year's report. So usually they want like tens of thousands of dollars, but maybe for 1,000 or 2,000, they might sell you last year's report, and you can take a lot of data from that and project by 1 year. It's not too difficult. You just add 5% or 10% to the numbers, and you have a pretty good report. Let's go to the Twitter example. I put it there because I was thinking of social issues and what can I, so what social issue did Twitter solve? When Dorsey started Twitter, he just wanted a simple way of allowing people to communicate with a small group in one shop. Instead of having to send emails to 20 people and sort of telling them what's happening, there's a meeting at 10 o'clock or something, you just put it in your phone or something and everybody sees it. But it ended up solving a big social problems. Can you kind of guess? I mean, of course, we know what happened. Like we are told, at least, that in Egypt, Twitter was very central to the whole thing. The rest of the social problem itself is really that sometimes governments or organizations can try to block information, can block the dissemination of information. They can control your phone line, or they can control your means of communication. So if you come up with something like this, it goes around that problem. So it solves that problem of people being able to communicate with each other more freely. And from an idea, from a simple idea of allowing people to, now today it's a multi-billion-dollar value company because it attracted a lot of people to use it, and they started inventing new ways of using it. So solving social problems can generate a business. And the other way, the converse of that is also very true. Starting a business creates jobs. It adds economic value. And it creates wealth. And that money has to go somewhere. We as entrepreneurs or successful, when they get money, maybe we can't eat all that money. We can put it in the bank, but then we're afraid of like what's happened in Cyprus, you know. So money is not something that you can basically stuff under your mattress or just eat it or whatever. You have to put it back into something. And so basically the privilege that we have is basically to be able to direct where it goes. So it goes here or it goes here. And so we are kind of playing a little bit this privileged position, being able to say, okay, it goes here. But in the end, it's not ours. It never was and never will be. It's basically an intangible thing that keeps flowing. So I'll leave you with this idea that also creating a business is a good social thing. And if you have any intention of doing that, then yes, move ahead and do create. We were actually invited to the White House not too long ago with Osama and his organization, and because the White House, President Obama, is very conscious of this issue that the Middle East especially is lacking jobs, and they want to try and help this whole job creation ecosystem, if you will. And they realize that entrepreneurs like you, social entrepreneurs or real entrepreneurs, have a great role to play. This is the Hafra thing I was talking to you about. Is Ahmed Al-Ghazi. I just met him like a month ago here. He was trying to also raise some money, and he launched his thing. He just sent me an email a few days ago that he launched this Hafra, so you might check it out. What type of things have we invested in at Sand Hill Angels? We look at a really broad variety of things. So Cadence Biotech is a company that makes an orthosis, which is a piece of equipment that you wear, and it helps people that have a problem with their muscle. For example, people that have had a stroke or had an injury, they can't pull their leg forward. So this device doesn't use any electric motors or anything. It just uses a simple spring. And so it's a low-cost device, and it helps people to walk that otherwise would have to use a wheelchair. No weight is almost a silly thing. When you go to some restaurants, they don't take reservations, and so you have to wait in line. So this thing works on your phone, on a smartphone, and they put you in a virtual line on the phone. So you can be somewhere else, and then they send you a little message that your turn is up in about 10 minutes, so you just go there. So, and it's growing very fast. I mean, we invested in it about a year ago. It has seated 12 million people already, and it's growing quite a bit faster than OpenTable. I'm sure you're familiar with OpenTable, another way you do reservations. So this is the no reservations version.
And where is it? This is in the United States? Or?
This is here, yes. There are other companies like it. There's like 3 or 4, and that's usually the case, that there will be sort of competition between a few of them. No weight is mostly between middle and east coast and middle U.S., not on the west coast.
See, the problem with this in the Middle East is that the lack of Wi-Fi internet connection. With a couple of our friends, we developed an app similar to this called Easy Life. We worked on it like for more than 5 months, and we failed because it was an app for food delivery, so that you don't have to actually call the place. You just send them something, and they will deliver the food. But we failed because of, infrastructure, internet connection, and so on and so forth.
Where can I ask you?
In northern Iraq,
Yeah, I mean, even in Lebanon, I was there, and still the cost of roaming, if you will, if you want to use phone, was way enormous because it's a little bit monopolized by somebody. In other Arab countries, I'm not sure, it varies. I have somebody here from, he's Lebanese also, and he's trying to start a video streaming business. And so, but he's looked at all these issues and he thinks it can be done now. But you're right, I mean, there's problems in it. So when you have problems like that, what you should do is look at the problem as an opportunity. So maybe the thing is to start some kind of a mini phone or Wi-Fi system or something like that allows connections. But of course, I mean, it has to be countrywide and all that, so it's a big-ish project, but don't let that scare you. I started a company that was going to compete really with Lucent, but I was, I guess, crazy enough in those days that I didn't care. Yeah, I can compete with Lucent. And when I went to the first venture capital, first one ever, I think it's called Mayfield, the company here. And they said, well, Salim, how big is this market that you're going to address? And I said, well, it's probably going to be like a few billion, and maybe we'll be able to sell, you know, up to $1 billion. I thought it was like big numbers. So the guy looks at me and says, we only invest in markets that are in 100 billion to 500 billion. And they were the company that invested, and he was telling me about Silicon Graphics. I don't know if you're familiar. It's a computer company that was making computers, more powerful computers for like making movies and things like that. And so I said, okay. Unfortunately for him, it turns out that I had made a mistake. The market that I was investing was bigger, and by the time we grew and were selling, it was actually, we got much bigger than that, and they lost out. But you never know. Your question about, there was a question in the beginning as we would get back to, and I forgot it. Was it about market or?
Just saying that the previous talk was speaking mostly about technology difference and the different types of technology, but I'm wondering if you can comment on how you can be different in a sense that has nothing to do with technology.
Oh, I mean, all right, let's take one of those examples, for example. This other thing, Flywheel, that's a company that allows you to call a taxi on your phone. So when you look on the phone, you will see where the taxis are, these yellow dots. And you'll know which one is closest to you, so you kind of just click on it, and the taxi will contact you, and he will come to you. It's not really technology. I mean, software, right? You write the software, you have to do some amount of, you might have something, but it's really an application of some existing technology, the iPhone itself or the smartphone, as well as some software. So that's what I meant really by, it's not really a real technology, like, you know, like you have invented transistor or something, or a new chip or something like that, or a new way of making a chip or something like that. So at the angel level, since the amounts of money that we give out are not so large, and we try to look at companies that are not really trying to do something like build a huge hardware system or like that. AnyMeeting is another company that allows you to do meetings with several people using your PC, low cam, you know, the webcam on your PC. So those are examples of things that we looked at. So coming back, yes.
You mentioned the difference between social entrepreneurs and real entrepreneurs.
Maybe I shouldn't have said the word real because they're both real.
Oh, you think so? I was just making sure.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. You caught me on that. So, is the product differentiated? If you, I mean, when we're talking about a company, if everybody's going to be able to compete with you very easily, the chances of success are not very good. And so you have to have something, a little edge in what you're doing. And that's what we're saying here. You have to be able to tell the investor how it is different without really telling them your secret sauce, so to speak, how you do it or how you are achieving this. And that's fine with them. You know, you just want to understand exactly what is the difference and what is the advantage. Scalability. Okay, so if you're baking cakes and you can bake 100 cakes every day, and then you hire someone to help you, and then you can make 200 every day, and so on. You're scaling the business, right? You're making it bigger and bigger. But every time you do that, you have quite a bit of expenses. You may need more space and more people and so on. So that's, every business is scalable, but some businesses are more scalable than others. For example, if you start a website where you're showing cakes, not really making them, and selling those things, then you can duplicate that 100 million times and send it all over the world with a click of a button, basically, without having to spend a lot more money. So that's what we mean by easily scalable. How much will it cost to deliver this product? And so you have to think about all of these things. We will move on. The right time. That's probably one of the most difficult things. If you're too far ahead trying to do something, it will almost certainly fail. I mean, I've seen companies, I've seen people here spend hundreds of millions. In one case, they spent about $1 billion on the idea, actually, of getting fiber to the home. So, fiber optic distribution for video and phone and all that. And that was in 1990, let's say. And after doing that, it went nowhere. They had to basically shut it down. And so basically trying to be too early. In fact, even today, we don't even have yet fiber to the home in most areas here. So being far behind, of course, that's too late. And so you have to catch this wave just at the right point. And that will give you the highest probability of success. And that's why we look at the timing. Usually, some new technology or something comes up, like smartphones, for example, and they enable a whole bunch of new kinds of things that can be done. Changes in regulations, sometimes the law changes, and you're suddenly allowed to do something that you weren't allowed to do before. There are changes now in the financial investment laws and regulations in the US. It used to be only up to 500 people could invest in a private company before it had to become a public company, which means you have to file all sorts of papers with the SEC, and it's a complicated and difficult process. But now they've increased that number to 2,500. So you can have 2,500 investors before the company has to become a public company. So that makes it a little easier and can bring more investment into small companies before they have to go public. The right team, of course. When you have a company and it's very small and one or two people, and then they start hiring more people, and those also hire even more people. Every time this process of hiring happens, there's a personality interaction, and you can see that if the person hiring is themselves are not very, don't have good qualities, good work ethics, and good understanding of the field that they're working in, and so on, they will hire somebody who is less good than themselves. And if they do that, and this second tier hires a third person who is even less good than themselves, you can see this company going downhill. And so you really have to make sure that the person at the top that you start with is really very good and is going to hire some very good people. At Google, for example, the two guys, get the names out, but they insist on being involved in every hire that goes on. I heard that they even go, all levels down because they want to make sure that these people that they're hiring are, excellent and know what they're doing and can help to grow the company. So can you attract A players? What are your personal qualities? Leadership, perseverance. Perseverance is a very important thing. And in your adventures trying to raise money for cause or something, you really have to keep going back. I'd give an example of one gentleman who came to us, and we looked at their business, and then we said, well, maybe not. And so he goes away. Another month, he sends me an email, and he says, oh, you know, we've been able to raise a little bit of money, but because you're such a great person to work with, I'd like to give you a chance to invest in my company. So he came back again and sent me, so I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe I should look at it again. This person is persevering, insistent. He comes back and tries to get me to invest. Besides the people that you hire and so on, you can have advisors, consultants, early investors. Your early investors are very important in terms of helping you go the next step. And so that's why we always recommend people look for good quality investors, the same as the investor is looking for a good quality person. It goes the other way. All right. How much money should you raise? This is an issue that all entrepreneurs that are starting businesses face. And if you, the advice here is to try to raise as little money as possible to get you to the next step. And then, so for example, you start with almost nothing, you have an idea, you raise as little money as possible, you put together either a prototype or a piece of software or something that just barely can operate. And so that's called the minimum product, and you try to show that around. And that gives you a little bit more value. And then at that point, which we call the next significant value inflection point, your value has gone up a little bit, then you go and you try to raise a little bit more money. And then you do something like you try to market it, you try to sell it and see if you get some traction, you get people paying attention to this. That gives you a little more value, increases your value a little bit more, then you go and try and raise a little bit more money. That's the process. And you also have to look at it from both sides, from the investor's point of view, from the entrepreneur's point of view, and from the investor's point of view. It's like trying to build a bridge from both sides, and they have to meet in the middle. And if you shoot too high, you miss. If you shoot too low, you miss again. So you have to kind of make it work. So the investor that's coming later will look and say, well, how much am I paying for this company that I'm going to invest in? If you raised $10 million a year ago and you didn't do very much, and now you're going to raise more money, so your value is not now maybe 100 million, but you know that's too much. I don't see this company being worth 100 million, and so that's not going to work. So again, this is the idea why you don't try to raise too much or make yourself look too big in the beginning. Think about what's going to happen at the next investment, the second, third, so on. And then when you figured out what's the minimum amount that you need, add a little bit of a buffer, add a little bit to give you a chance to last a little bit longer in case you can't find money quickly enough again, and so on. So this is an example about the consumer photo app. In other words, you have like an iPhone and you take photos and you do something with that. So what you should do first is complete and launch a minimum product, just the minimum thing required to make this thing look real and work and show it to people, and then you go to the next step and you raise a little bit more money. Then you get some users, some number of users, 1,000, 10,000, whatever. Now it gives you a little more value. You show it again, you raise a little bit more money. So that's just an example. This software is a service. I don't think we want to bother with that. Picking the right investors, as I mentioned, it's more than just money. You have to look and see at who is this company that's investing in my project and what connections can they give me in the future, that can turn out to be much more important than the amount of money that we give you to get started. You could almost forget everything that I told you here, almost, and keep in mind one of two things, and that is interpersonal relationships. That's really what it's all about in this whole area of raising and all that. Networking, and then being able to relate to the person that you're working with, the investor and the entrepreneur. Deal terms, I'm not sure that you're too interested in those details, whether you get common or preferred stock and so on, but if you have any questions about these things, let me know, and I'll be happy to answer these questions. These are probably too technical details. How do you get in front of investors? I think the answer is this type of thing. In other words, meetings, organizations that are trying to help you out, personal connections, networking is the way to do it. The web today is much, much more helpful than it was like 5 or 10 years ago. You can go on the web and find a lot of stuff. You just search and you will find a huge amount of connections and names of angels and so on. There are over like 2,000 angel organizations in the United States. And as Bruce mentioned, they are actually spending or investing almost as much money, if not more, than the venture companies. And that's causing a problem, actually, because they're investing in so many companies that there's not enough money for the venture companies to keep those companies going at the next stage. So we're calling that Series A crunch. So many startups are happening now, not enough money to fund them all to the next stage. Incubators are also becoming extremely popular, and they've been around for a while, but they're like growing like gangbusters. Those are small organizations that help you to move ahead. They will invest a little bit of money in you, and then they sort of will coach you to get organized and try to raise the next amount of money. How do you get the best terms? You compete, meaning you let the investors compete with each other. Find 2 or 3 investors and let them compete for you. And see who's going to give you the best deal. What do you need to have in your hand when you go to see an investor? You need a short executive summary, something, the shorter the better. Sometimes we talk about this elevator pitch and think about Twitter, 140 characters. The shorter the better, and it needs to be able to really make them think. Recently we had somebody come and he's starting a startup that sells movie tickets. And so the way he introduces it is, we put butts in movie seats. So very quickly explains to you exactly what he's trying to do. You need that presentation, 15 or 20 slides, not long. The shorter, the better again, because investors are old like me and they fall asleep very quickly. So if you bore them with too many slides, they'll just get lost. A demo or a simulation or prototype, a piece of software, whatever it is that you have, can go a long way to help get you funded. Even if you're trying to do something, let's say on the social side, if you set up a little website, and it's very easy to do that these days, and show them something that helps them out. Sorry? A prototype, yes. Yes, absolutely. And it's not always easy. Sometimes the prototype is expensive to produce or something if it's a piece of hardware. If it's a software or a website or a demonstration, it can be much easier. Nobody does it like a very detailed business plan. They just show broad financials. And of course, you have to have some sort of corporation, so you can sell shares. So you have to have a legal entity. So we asked to see that there's a corporation and you can buy shares in that. And there's some documents that go with that, like if there is patents, if there is IP property, and resumes of the founders. Those are the things that you have to have. So to end, the world is really counting on you because you are the creators of jobs, and you are the ones who are taking on your shoulders this responsibility of moving us ahead. So take the risk. That's the only thing I'll say. Take the risk. There's no failure. We've invented a new word for failure in Silicon Valley. It's called pivoting. So you're going one way, it doesn't work, so you just change it, you go a different way. We pivot. So if you hear that word, think about what it means. Thank you.
So if both speakers just come up for a couple of questions, and then we'll take a break.
Well, thank you for my voice. So thank you for this wonderful presentation. My question is for you. I mean, you are talking about investing in projects, right? So is that, thank you, is that only related to technology or maybe in everything?
No, we will look at any project that has merit or makes sense. I mean, for the angel group that I'm in, of course, it has to look like a business, like something that's going to be successful, generate some jobs, generate some, and generate some money back to the investors. They are looking at that. That's what they are in.
Actually, why I'm asking, because, for example, from Morocco, by the way, I'm Yassine from Morocco, and they have a friend who is very interested in, not in technology, but in fast food industry. And there in Morocco, it's like there are only just, I mean, Morocco, a very, I mean, a country where a lot of things is going on. But actually, just 3 big chain, I mean, companies who are controlling everything. And he's within, I mean, he's having an idea, but he doesn't know who to address. So
start talking to everybody you can and get feedback. And I'll tell you, my own personal project wasn't going to be a technology. I wanted to start a falafel store chain. I'm not kidding. I was thinking about this. No, none of that here, and that's what. But then a friend of mine said, "Why are you thinking about that? Think about something that you know something about and how to do it." So I said, "Oh, that's a good idea." But fast food, I think it's a business, right? So why not?
Hello. Thank you both for your talks. My question will be for Bruce. The 2 examples of the successful companies that you showed us were companies that actually that were bought by bigger companies. So I'm wondering, is that the goal from the beginning? I mean, is the goal becoming the next Google, or is the goal being bought by Google?
Well, I actually, I'm going to date myself, but when I first got into business, about half the companies achieved liquidity for us by going public, novel concept, and the other half by being acquired. Today, public offerings, they happen in a big way, but they don't happen the way they used to, where medium-sized companies could raise a modest amount of money and then have a public market for themselves. So for us, we really do, we might get lucky and find ourselves in a Facebook or a Google or someone like that, but more likely it's going to be an acquisition. And so you do need, and quite frankly, if you build a company to be successful that way, you might preserve the option to go public. And it's different situations, different countries too. You know, if it's a U.S. investment, that's one thing. If it's an investment, say, in India, we could go public there, that company, because the situations are just different. But for the most part, we want to become important as a company to somebody bigger than us along the way. We want to be strategically important to a much larger organization, and that when they come to make a decision, should they build it or buy it, it will be more compelling for them to buy it. And then we want to be the guy that they go to make that happen. So.
Yeah, I might add, a lot of companies that come to us from day one almost, they're positioning themselves to be bought by another company. If Google is missing a wheel, make the wheel, and they'll buy it. So,
yeah. Hi, I'm Rana. I'm Palestinian American. I'm living in the occupied territories. My question is more focused on the creation of incubator accelerator programs or organizations. One problem we have in Palestine is that, especially in IT, they are popping up, but they're very reliant on just project grants, essentially, that come from international organizations. So they'll be very successful, there's a lot of participation, but then they disappear. So what's the process of creating a successful incubator in the Middle East? I don't know if you can comment on this, either of you, that actually has some long-term viability. What does that look like? Would it look something actually like starting up a business in itself, in the sense that you need investment? Yeah.
Well, incubators in general are a business, and their job is to bring in entrepreneurs, nurture them along, and hopefully graduate. Plug and Play has a great strategy. Actually, they all have a good way of doing this, but the ones that I think are going to be most successful are the ones that provide some level of criteria, some evaluation for companies coming in. Some of them it's just a real estate play. They'll rent you space cheap. That's not by itself, I think, going to be successful. You need to have some kind of a measurement of quality company. But then you need to provide a lot of support, and that support is in mentoring, in developing relationships, making introductions, showing what your children, if you will, in this incubator to the next generation of parents for them, which are going to be the follow-on money. And put together programs, put together presentations, open houses, all sorts of introductory type of programs, so that you open the visibility to the larger community about what's going on inside their four walls. And then if you've chosen them all coming in, you've given them the right support going in, and then you're giving them the right exposure, that's almost the best you can do.
There's someone here, actually, maybe that's, Naamat is
yeah.
right there. Maybe he should later talk about that.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, incubators are a very interesting thing. Basically, you have to have somebody with a little bit of money to be able to, but mostly you have to be able to get a space or somewhere where these companies can go. So if you can start it, almost from scratch, if you can find somebody that gives you a little bit of space for free, maybe for some period of time, a year or two, and then get these people to meet there. And just by having them all together in one place, there's a lot of interaction that happens. And then you can organize meetups, and they do them here. They call them startup parties and launch events. And so an event, just like this event actually, not very difficult to organize. And then you get people to go and start talking about what they're doing. And simply by connecting them together, you get something happening. Then, of course, yes, there will be a need for a little bit of funds to come from somewhere. But there are organizations that are doing this in the Middle East. You can probably connect you.
Yeah, it's a big problem in Palestine. It's really reliant on just grants, and they're not very helpful.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentations. Something you said about India definitely rang true for me in Tunisia. I'm in Tunis right now. And what we're seeing, especially post-Arab Spring uprisings, is lots of support for the startup community, which is cool because you're seeing different organizations coming in and supporting entrepreneurship as sort of a solution to job creation and mobilizing youth and innovation. But now we're seeing a lot of that, lots of startups, no venture capital, private equity ecosystem, hardly at all. So we're starting up, we're getting all this excitement going, and they're all, 3 to 5 years, majority of them are failing. So how do you deal with this? Because in one sense, it's a good thing. You're like, this startup energy, this community, this is new, this is cool, this is something you want to keep going. You don't want to discourage people. But at the same time, when they're kind of past that startup phase, nobody has really started investing in that growth stage or even that early growth stage. Nobody's there to pick up the slack after these startup competitions. So I guess my question is sort of twofold: is how do you deal with that issue? And then what are the main elements you need for a really nascent venture capital ecosystem? Where we have like maybe one angel group and one kind of real VC that can be considered a VC. Mostly it's bankers who have, a bank has opened a VC arm, which they're just really bankers that move to a different building and invest as if they're VCs, but they're still thinking like bankers because they're trained like bankers. It's not their fault. They don't have the VC mindset. So, it's kind of the chicken and the egg, which comes first, and I don't know if you have any insights from, working in different regions, how do you deal with this?
I mean, you're right, there's a gap, and it's funny, we were talking about this the other day. The gentleman who is here now, who is part of an angel group in the Middle East, in Bahrain, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you want to say a word or two about that.
Why don't you want to weigh in on that?
Okay.
But also, we started seeing a lot, but there's starting to be sort of more real venture and angel groups in the Middle East. It is starting, it is not widespread. And this mentality of investing only in buildings and hotels is also starting to change. So there's there are some investors that have put some money in about 20 or 30 companies, and then there's companies like Abraj, and then there is the Aramex people, and they started Wanda. And so there's an ecosystem that's starting, and I hope it grows a lot bigger.
I was referring specifically to the Tunisian market, but absolutely on the middle of the MENA region and more generally, absolutely, it's starting to move, but still Tunisia very, very nascent.
So I'm going to be speaking after the break,
Okay.
And we set up an angel fund, an angel network, and an accelerator program in Bahrain, where there was nothing like that. So I'll probably talk about how we started that up. I mean, no one knew what we were talking about when we went to the market, but we actually managed to get it done. So I'll talk about that in a bit, but in terms of the next rounds, we're not Silicon Valley individuals. Whoever says that we want to be the next Silicon Valley, it's just not going to happen. You have to actually fit and work with what the current market is. So we're looking at, rather than venture capitalists, we're looking at family offices, established business people, convincing them to start investing in the businesses. There's no VCs, so go to who has the money. And that's pretty much the solution. It takes time. It takes a very good personality to convince them to part with people's hard-earned money. But if you get them involved in the process and get them to see what the companies are, the entrepreneurs usually don't have a link to the people who have money. So if you act as that link, that'll help quite a bit. But I'll talk about how we started everything and what we're doing after the break.
Well, actually, I made a good point about the ecosystem has to develop over time. It's what makes Silicon Valley so special. You have all the different advisors, the legal, the business. A lot of that is also embedded, and I'm finding that in India, in the family offices. So you have the very successful companies, and the promoters of those companies, if they have the right sensibilities, they want to reinvest their funds in new venture. So if you can find some of that community where you don't have funds that have been organized by people who've raised it from other funds, but really they're investing in essence their own money. It's a hybrid between an individual angel and a venture capitalist. It's a family office. It's their money. They earn it. It's from their corporation, their business that may be hundreds of years old. But they are looking at branching out and investing directly. So that would be kind of the other place to start.
Hello, my name is Sabra Dakhil. I'm from Afghanistan. I have two questions. First one is that when you invest in startup businesses in India, in countries like India and Middle East, their money, although you will have a lot of people who ask for this product, but the money will be less. If you invest in something like here in California, there will be a lot of competition, but the money will be high. How do you choose to invest in one of those, one of two companies that you have, if you are going to invest? And the other question is that, do you offer any training courses for youth leaders around the world coming here and being trained how to invest the art of investing?
So personally, yeah, that's a very interesting question, because personally I've started becoming more interested in businesses outside the US, simply because here is so much competition, and just about anything you think about, 5 people are already doing it. So we do look at companies that are operating outside. Generally speaking, the investors are a little bit shy about companies that are in other countries because of the legal issues and because of the issues of setting up, the corporation and all. So they require them to maybe be incorporated here. But that's the technicality almost. A lot of the companies we see incorporate here in the U.S., but everybody's working out somewhere in Chile or anywhere around the world.
So you prefer a lot of people buying your products in a cheaper price than having this high competition?
Markets can be different. I mean, Saudi Arabia or India or China, they're all markets. So we don't look at really, the granular or the amount paid per product. It's a market, so you look at it overall, and they can be very big. I mean, you probably have experience. Maybe you can.
Well, look, you're going to have competition anywhere you go if you come up with an idea that ends up finding some success. And either that competition is going to be early in the process, or it may come later. When one of the biggest fears we have, in India is that the minute somebody sees a formula that somebody is doing and it's working, all of a sudden a bunch of other people start to jump on top of that and try to steal it in a way or take it away. So you have to be thinking about that defensively a little bit and protect yourself, almost fly under the radar a little bit, and don't be so proud and vocal about the success you're having. Just do it quietly. But you have to recognize that the competition is going to be there, and do everything you can to put roadblocks in place, put relationships in place. Sometimes it's technology, but often it's not. Just good business practices that will take somebody else longer to compete against. And they are big markets, so you can share them. You don't have to worry too much about that. But we like doing deals in other countries, and it is more difficult because you have local issues around issues of labor, other legal uniqueness. To me, if you're willing to go and learn that, have the right local partner who understands it better because they live there, and they'll team up with you on a venture, I look at that as a competitive advantage because it is difficult to do, and not everybody's going to do it. But if you're willing to go there, which we have always been willing to do, it's paid off for us.
Thank you, Bruce and Salim. We won't get any more questions for this session because we have other speakers, and after their speeches we will have another set of Q&A, and maybe you can hear the answer of your questions following the speakers. Let's have a round of applause for these speakers.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. It's really an honor to meet each of you, and I'm so impressed with your inspiration and your goals and the fact that you're all agents of change in the world in a region that is the heartland. I mean, this is where life was started, where humanity was started, and it's really important that we create tremendous social change there. So thank you for your efforts. My name is Mona Defraoui, and I was born in Alexandria, Egypt. My parents are Egyptian, and as you can tell from my accent, I'm extremely American. I've been living in this country since I was 7.5. We left Egypt when I was 6 under Nasser's regime, and my parents were educated at Berkeley, had PhDs from Berkeley, and then did postdoctoral work at Cornell University and returned to Cornell, taught there for 8 years, and then moved to the University of Maryland School of Medicine in Baltimore, Maryland, where I lived. I was 15. I lived there for a few years. Baltimore. Thank God. Are you there now, full time? Oh my. Okay. So one of my goals, because I'm really a social entrepreneur at heart, we all know that it's a calling. It's not a job. And I've been wanting to do economic development in Baltimore for a long time. But as some of our honorable speakers before me have mentioned, sometimes you're before your time, you know, and it's very difficult to create, although you do what you can, and then sometimes you don't even have to do anything. You hold the space, and the world catches up with you, and the timing is perfect. So hopefully we'll have some slides here soon. And I will apologize that they're not very fancy, but they come from the heart. So I finished them at midnight last night for you. But I wanted to make this more of a personal conversation because I really want to support you in your goals, and I want to support you in success. And so you've heard from our terrific, very experienced earlier speakers, you know, the nuts and bolts of how entrepreneurs succeed and put businesses together. And for all of us, even if we're doing social entrepreneurship, there's always the financial component. There's always a business in there somewhere. You know, we have to figure out how to eat and keep our families going while we're creating the social change that's so important. So if you have a charitable foundation, you still have to manage it and run it. You still have to fundraise. It's still a business. So the same skill set is used. And hopefully some of the same talents will be used. So really entrepreneurship is, you are a change agent. So as companies, there was an article that was just published a couple of days ago actually, which was a little distressing when I first read it, but a Stanford professor realized that after companies go public, they're no longer innovative. This was a horrible thing, so we don't want companies to go public anymore. We want to keep them private so they innovate. And basically what he did was he was counting the number of patents that companies create pre-IPO versus post-IPO, and so as companies grow, they become more corporate. And are you able to find my presentation? Okay, because I have it in a USB key that's in that bag there. Yeah, it just says AMENDS Mona. So I'm sorry, no, in the briefcase, in one of the side pockets, there should be a little white USB key for Kingston. I don't know where it. Did you find it? God only knows I have so many bags. They really were good slides. You found it? No? Maybe. And us, we're naturally more innovative, we're more flexible, we have hopes for the future, and entrepreneurs by nature hold that energy. So what I'm hoping to do is help you support that today so that you're able to make it through all the stress, because it is very stressful to be an entrepreneur. And here in Silicon Valley especially, I've been here now for over 4 years, it's so sexy to be an entrepreneur, and there's so many classes on how to be an entrepreneur, and everybody and his brother is running around with the next idea, you know, that people don't stop and really think about it. You know, what am I doing? What am I creating? How big is this opportunity? And we get lost, I think, oftentimes in the mousetrap. So hopefully I'll help you focus a little bit and avoid some of that. Okay, so entrepreneurship as change agent. So if you could go to the next slide, please.
The clicker should work.
So what do I point to? There we go. So I'm now CEO and founder of Equidity. It's a financial services startup that's focused on helping companies, late stage, pre-IPO companies, prepare for... Okay. We help companies go public again. So I've spent my career doing investor relations, working with IPO companies and fundraising. I've been a member or a founder of 9 startups now. Founded 4 of my own companies, Equidity currently, that I've been working in for about 2 years, developing and building and pivoting in. Inside Venture, which brought me here to Silicon Valley in 2009, in 2008. I sold it 15 months later to Second Market, and they basically messed it up, so I'm back. Previously, I also had other businesses, so Venture Quest helped to support a lot of startup companies. Early stage, I did early stage funding and investor relations. And then I even retired for a few years, taught entrepreneurship at Johns Hopkins, and accidentally started another business, Quantum Yoga and Wellness, which is a hobby, so that's when you know you're full-blown, entrepreneur. I've also been a team member of 4 companies that went public, so I spent the bulk of the 90s, 10 straight years, working for 4 companies in-house, usually reporting to the CEO, and helping to manage the post-market trading, so post-IPO trading of companies, which today doesn't work very well. There's pretty much a pump and dump scenario. I don't know how much you all know about the public markets, but it's not working. And as Bruce Barra mentioned earlier, he used to experience about 50% of his exits going to IPO, which is the grand slam home run for the venture industry, and that those returns protect you in taking huge risks so that you can afford to allow some companies in your portfolio fail or perhaps have smaller exits to M&A. So without that critical component, the IPO, it's totally disrupted the venture industry. It's disrupted late stage growth. Companies used to go public in 5 years. Now it takes 10 if they're lucky enough to get out. And then once they get out, they usually become orphans in the public markets. So that's what I'm working to help fix, having these 10 years of experience doing. And I also was part of a startup private equity fund, CapGen Financial, and I raised about $500 million in about 6 months. So I love raising money for my clients. And, but even more important, we're here to talk about the Middle East today, and I know that somewhere in my heart is just part of my duty to give back. And my grandmother, for example, was a true entrepreneur, in her day and age. So she was one of the first women to go to college in Egypt. They allowed 2 more. There were 3 women in her class in 1929. She graduated medical school, the first woman and only woman in her class, 1934. And eventually she became the health commissioner for Alexandria. And her husband was an OBGYN, and she was pediatrics and public health. And so definitely, whenever I think my life is hard or there's gender inequality, I just think of what she must have had to go through. And even though she graduated top of her class, they wouldn't allow her to be a surgeon because she was a woman. And they allowed her to go into pediatrics, but after age 6, she could no longer examine boys, 6 years and older, who, she couldn't examine them naked anymore. So just, some of the interesting changes in the world. So my life is so easy and I have so much opportunity, in spite of everything. So my father, actually, 80 years old, spent 50 years in this country, and my mother moved back to Egypt 2.5 years ago, right before the revolution. And I saw immediately that what the revolution was about economics. And it's about hope for the future. And so there's no way that corporations, large corporate enterprises are going to come in and create all the jobs and the economics that the region needs. So entrepreneurship is the only path for peace and prosperity. And the way to get to peace is through prosperity. Give people, what they need. They will have hope to think about bigger things than having to fight for less. Next slide, please. So, just simply, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Hopefully all of you are familiar with this. So much of the population in the Middle East is still stuck really in the first 1 or 2 levels of Maslow's hierarchy. So it's really hard to get people to think about peace or even social entrepreneurship when there's so many very basic needs. So we have to fill those needs first, and it's amazing that so many of you are here and devoted to this, and you're being totally supported because everybody is focused on this now. So just know that you have the wind at your backs as you move forward. Next slide, please. So some of the things, as society's in the Middle East is going to progress very quickly now. Oh, okay, terrific, thank you. I'm going to try to move it quickly so we have time for other two speakers. So, as I was building my company, I became very aware of, the evolution of economies, because here I am doing basically a lot of macroeconomics in my company. Because what we've realized is, we've taken the stagnant economic conditions over the last 12 years, and they really have been flat. Even though we had the real estate bubble and then the real estate chasm, if you remove those, they really even out to zero. We've been flat for over 12 years. And so what we've done is connect the dots back to this lack of growth and the lack of jobs is because of the lack of IPOs. So when we look at how economies form and how they progress, we talk about technology, but the definition of technology is really just a new way to do something. That's what technology is. So whether you are reinventing coffee, like Starbucks, which has created almost 800,000 jobs worldwide, and has made coffee a spiritual experience, or whether you're creating social innovation, they're all related. So technology is simply a new way of doing something. So when the agricultural revolution started about 10,000 years ago, up to 150 years ago in America, half of the US population made their living in agriculture. By 1946, the Industrial Revolution, which started in the late 1800s, really hit its peak. So from 1946 to 1978, America doubled in its value and in quality of life. So a dollar could buy twice as much by 1978 than it could in 1946. And this was the era of high consumerism and all sorts of washers and dryers and things at home, and the era of Mad Men, if you know the TV show, the advertising industry where I spent my first 5 years after college. And then so still in America, you hear, Americans and Obama talking about manufacturing jobs, and we need to get back to manufacturing jobs. We want middle-class jobs. That was the whole theme. But the reality is we're not going to go back, because we're continually evolving manufacturing. And even if outsourcing is part of that evolution, we're bringing back more profits into this country because of that. And we're creating more opportunities globally also, because there's opportunities for agrarian societies to now move into manufacturing, create more value there. So it's obvious that the digital revolution is very important, but I want to take us also one step further, because I think we've already moved into the entrepreneurship revolution, and you're all part of this, and you all know it. I mean, it's in the DNA. We all come with this, we're ready to evolve, not just digitally, but really who we are and how we experience life and the value and the contribution that we make. So a couple of things that I had to learn. I mean, I was diagnosed as an entrepreneur in 1988 during my last year of my MBA program, and it's a fatal diagnosis, but now they've gotten it, they can manage the condition, so you don't have to die from it. You can actually live a long life with it. But there is a difference I've learned in hiring people between entrepreneurs and employees. Entrepreneurs, by nature, everybody will use energy. I've heard that word today. Very high energy people. You're always looking to grow. I love that steep part of the learning curve. I hate it when it flattens out. Boredom is the arch nemesis. And it's okay if that makes you crazy and these people are too kinetic and anxiety ridden or whatever, and they make you crazy. You're probably more in the employee side of this equation. I don't think anybody in this room probably is, but I've hired people who love the idea of entrepreneurship, and then they really find they have more needs for security and less risk-taking, and that's all fine too. But it's important to know who you are and what's the difference. Optimism is extremely important. You have to stay focused. And obviously part of the reason is you're holding this vision that the current structure has not created for you. You've found problems. This is what entrepreneurs do. They create value by finding a problem and creating a solution for it. And then in the process of finding that solution, there's value that's created. So in classic businesses, you deliver that value to the customer, they give you value back, right? Dollars. That's what it's, this is what's the value of this note? It's a $1 bill, a $20 bill, it's the value. We have to be passionate, and you saw in Salim's slides that, it's really always, it's about people first. So the investors are going to look for the person and see, what's their track record, what have they done, what sort of energy is here, how much passion is there, because the stumbling blocks are huge. If you don't have passion, if this doesn't come from the heart, you're not going to make it through all of the challenges that exist. And even more, I think in social entrepreneurship, although you're all in a place now where, there's so much desire for change, it's there. So if you can capture that like a wind in your sail, instead of feeling that you're climbing up a hill and working against gravity, but instead that everybody wants more and better. Everybody wants a better world to live in. And so if you just understand that life itself is supporting you in reaching success, through amends, through all sorts of opportunities, just knowing that will help you create and attract to you the opportunity. So it's more attracting it to you as opposed to creating it through fossil fuel. So digital versus analog, if that helps. Entrepreneurs have to be visionary. I think we tend to start with the vision and work our way down into taking the idea and then putting it into words and then building it, bringing team members, building actual products and businesses. So we go from the vision into the physical. Definitely relentless. I think we heard that. Persistence is important. We're one of a kind, so we may ruffle some feathers when we walk into rooms or whatever, but here in Silicon Valley, that's actually a great attribute. It took me a while to grow into that in myself. Being the only Egyptian girl, in my 3rd grade class, and sticking out like a sore thumb, to now, appreciating that, hey, this uniqueness can actually be helpful. Ambition is necessary. You got to keep moving those boulders and not giving up. And we like to take risks. And that's a profile that I think, has helped me define. So now I'm way better at recruiting, especially more junior team members. So I'm not going to put them into situations where their discomfort level is so high that they can't create. And so I'll bring them on later when the company's a little more stable. And again, it's all about creating value together. So Dr. Enrico Moretti really inspired me. He he published this book, The New Geography of Jobs, in July of 2012, and really helped me focus on the human capital. So that's where I was inspired to create the 4th coin beyond the digital revolution. It's really about the entrepreneurship revolution. He calls it the innovation industry, and I call it the entrepreneurship industry, which is a little broader. But what he discovered is, so back in 1946 to 78, when we were primarily a manufacturing society, the most productive cities, the most active cities in America were Detroit. That was the #2 city in America after New York. Akron, Ohio, and Pittsburgh. So if you know anything about the US, Baltimore was probably up there. We all know where those cities are today. So now the innovation clusters are really being led by Silicon Valley, and it's about the people. So 10 years ago, when I went into Johns Hopkins University, trying to create more economic development in Baltimore, and believing that at the center of geographic centers of economic activity was a research university. And here was Johns Hopkins with the crown jewel over, at that time, 10 years ago, it was over $1 million, $1.2 billion in research dollars. They should have had double Silicon Valley's activity, and yet nothing. You can hear crickets chirping in Baltimore, practically. Every once in a while they'll have Under Armour or Millennial Media went public last year, because it's about the human capital. That's what we have here. So here you are these, President Bush Sr. used to say these single points of light. So you're a point of light, in your country, and you have to shine and help everybody. You have to inspire them and motivate them to see what you can see. And slowly you will begin to attract the people that have that same vision to come with you. And it is through more and more people and more bodies and more creativity and the sharing of ideas that we have here. Just like we have the patent system here, Thomas Jefferson put it into place to share ideas. And his thought was, if we publicly disclose, we'll give you a 17-year monopoly on this, and it'll stimulate so much more innovation together, and it has. So what's important is your vision is like your crown of your tree, but the root system of the tree is just as large underground. And so there's so many great visionaries that can't manifest and can't create, so you've got to have that legal structure. You've got to understand what comes today. I started a very similar company 4 years ago, and it took me about 9 months to raise $1.2 million in my Series A. Today, the bootstrapping world lasts longer. It takes longer to raise money. There is a great angel network, so I did an angel round first. But it's a tough world out there. It's taken me twice as long to do it this time around. It should have taken me half as long, right? I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've done this before. But also the world wasn't quite ready. It had to see Facebook's IPO flop first to understand that second market. My previous acquirer was not the saving grace, and perhaps exactly the opposite, and that IPOs were necessary to the system. Liquidity is being challenged, as we've heard from our two previous speakers, so that those challenges are actually reshaping the industry. So more and more companies are being built to M&A because that is an exit that can happen. Fewer companies are being built with a goal of IPO right now, and some companies are even saying, well, we don't want to IPO as an exit. But it's an integral part of our financial structure in this country, and it really can't go away. So that's a misperception that people have, and I have a solution and a recipe for bringing it back, so I'm not worried. And then the last point that I wanted to make, you do have very limited resources. Timeframes will take longer in business, but you have to think of the company or your enterprise as the baby. So the baby has to eat first, and so when everything else is limited, and this is part of what helps me in selecting partners and employees and so on, are they feeding the baby? Are they that passionate and that interested in feeding the baby? Or are they taking food from the baby? You know, a newborn can't survive if you don't feed it. So that's the attitude that you have to have with a startup to make it work. And be ready. It can take you longer, so just be prepared. So I don't know why this slide is here. Did we do something wrong? I had 1 or 2 more slides. Sorry, Nima. I wanted to show you, I had a picture of my father, actually. So jumping from business entrepreneurship and closing with social entrepreneurship. So my father, I mentioned, was a professor at Cornell University for 8 years. He was at Alexandria University for probably 10 before that, and then University of Maryland for 27 years, where he was a favorite professor, always winning the Golden Apple Award, really loved to teach. And went back to Egypt because my mother's health actually had deteriorated, and healthcare is so bad in this country, it was very hard for him to take care of her full time. And in Egypt, she had excellent medical care and so on. And he moved back to the village of Defraoui, Kafr Defraoui, which is very different. You can go to Alexandria, where her brother is there, and he has 2 hospitals, or Cairo, where he has 5 sisters. There he is. So this is my father, Mohi al-Din al-Defraoui, and I want you all to write down his email address. He is Mohi, M-O-H-Y-E-E, 64@gmail.com. I'll repeat that. So this is about 10 years old, this picture. And these are 3 of my best startups that I didn't mention in my earlier slides. So my kids who are 10 years older now. But he, in the village, he went out one day, he's driving, and he notices that some children are playing. And he says, why aren't you in school? Well, our parents can't afford to pay the tuition, which is like $60 a year or something. So he sends these 75 children to school and has been paying their tuition for 3 years. So of course, once the villagers caught wind of this, they started lining up outside his door and around the block. And this one's mother needs a liver, and this one needs, and so he's helping people as much as he can, but he then created the Friends of Kafr Defraoui, which is like a homeowners association, so that each of the, everyone who owns an acre puts in like $20 per acre, and then now there's a pool of funds, so all the village, and he created a board, so everybody's represented, and they all help each other with these needs, and they supply grants to families, and so they now have a grant process. He also started he paid for some sewage and water systems. And there are so many challenges. Somebody was mentioning connectivity. Like, for example, over the last 2.5 years, 3 different times, people have dug up the copper internet cable so that they could melt it down for the few dollars that it would be, because that's a significant amount of money for them, so then I can't email him or reach him. He now has satellite. And then while he was here in Silicon Valley in September, where we actually met Osama at a dinner, we met another entrepreneur, and he was inspired to create an adult literacy program with the goal of all Egypt reads in 2019. And there's now 100 adults in his literacy program. And out of the blue, someone from the Grameen Bank reached out to me over LinkedIn. I'm now connecting him to my father. So this is Mohammed Yunus's microfinance program. And so we have the seeds for the idea. I'm kind of pushing that for him to create more microfinance and perhaps connect with Kiva or some of the other folks. So I'm a little busy with my startup, but I keep sending emails. So if any of you are in Egypt and you'd like to connect with my father, he's also, through his Friends of Kafr Dafrawi program, is teaching democracy and trying to help the villagers make a better choice or their own correct choice when they vote in the next presidential election. So thank you for having me, and hopefully...
Excuse me? Can
Yes.
you please repeat the email?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. So the email is Mohyee, M-O-H-Y-E-E, 64 @gmail.com, and just tell him that you met his daughter Mona, and he'll love it. He has a lot of time, he has a secretary and a couple housekeepers, and nice staff, which you can afford to do. Not at all. Mohyee, M-O-H-Y-E-E, 64 @gmail.com. And he's in about an hour and a half south of Alexandria. And he'd be very happy to meet you if you're in Egypt. He'll invite you for a big lunch. And they call him now Il Kabir, the big guy in the village, which he loves. He goes to every wedding and every funeral. He's having a ball.
So I'll keep it short as far as the intro goes. This work. So, can you hear me? I'll just talk about this.
Press the button between lunches.
Load up. Okay. Anyway, really quickly, my background. My father's from Iran. My mother's German. I'd never been to the Middle East until last year. And background-wise work, I was head of business development for Founder Institute. Helped set up 9 different cities in the world. We launched 345 companies worldwide, and it was 4 of us working out of a garage. Now it's the largest accelerator program in the world. And along the way, I thought to myself, how come no one's doing anything in the Middle East? So 5 years ago, I got an email from a buddy of mine in Istanbul, and it said, closing, Pitme, Josh, what's Pitme? And so I looked it up, and it actually stands for Peace in the Middle East. So I bought the domain, didn't know what I was going to do with it. So fast forward, last May, I'm in a tree house in Santa Cruz on my 35th birthday, and I realized that I needed to do something. So I quit my job, flew out to Dubai and to judge Startup Weekend, and I decided to call it Progress in Technology Middle East because peace through technology, and I didn't want to get into politics. So how many of you have ever actually read the definition of entrepreneurship, or what it means to be an entrepreneur? Well, here it is in some form. If for some reason it doesn't say billion-dollar business and market and pitching investors, it just says starting something and making money and taking risk and doing something using land, labor, and natural resources. Well, for some reason, it seems like now it's almost changed a little bit. So here's my theory. Entrepreneurship today is tainted because it's become about raising money and who would you raise it from. And it's becoming a business. Well, there's nothing wrong with it being a business, but as a social entrepreneur, most of the time people don't want to invest because there's not the opportunity to have returns. So why are you an entrepreneur? Well, like livelihood, legacy, peace of mind, impact, success, money, bragging rights. No, the answer is actually that you don't have a choice because just like me, I never wanted to be an employee of a company to check in and check out and clock in and clock out. What I wanted to do was have an impact. I wanted to change the world. So here's the good news and the bad news. There will never be another Silicon Valley anywhere. And so this idea of emulating Silicon Valley and building an ecosystem is a bunch of BS because it's not possible.
Silicon Valley is so far ahead. It has universities, there's money, there's these networks that are built, and it's impossible to duplicate that, which in some sense maybe is the good news, but partially the entire startup entrepreneurial ecosystem around the world is now based on these returns that people are making here on startups in Silicon Valley. And so the investors want billion-dollar businesses. Well, unfortunately, when you don't have infrastructure to build a billion-dollar business, so that doesn't really make sense. So the closest thing that I found in the Middle East that kind of tried to do this was DSO, which is Dubai Silicon Oasis. It was a $5 billion project launched by the Prime Minister and the Sheikh of Dubai to build a city around entrepreneurship. So 7 square kilometers, housing, education, R&D, retail, like literally a city around entrepreneurship. Well, if you've been there now, it is a building with a shiny pineapple on top. They've lost $380 million in the last 3 years because they have people walking around who have absolutely no idea what ecosystem means. They have built infrastructure, and they walk around talking about giving discounts to rent for startups. So the bottom line is that the Middle East as a whole hasn't figured out what the difference between the ecosystem and infrastructure is. So that transition from being a brick and mortar or a real estate investor to being a technology investor is a slow process. So I have an example. I meet a gentleman in Abu Dhabi talking about wanting to build an incubator. So he's talking about this building and like these programs, and after about 10 minutes of talking with him, I realized I had no clue about technology. So I said to him, Khalid, why are you doing this? Like, oh, we want to support entrepreneurs and startups. I'm like, okay, well, that's great. Unfortunately, Abu Dhabi is not the epicenter of entrepreneurship, and there's not really an ecosystem. And so we talked, and he was just really excited, and obviously he had the money. So I asked him, I said, by the way, where does the money come from? Hundreds of millions of dollars? He says, tuna. So it's a family conglomerate that basically has made their money from tuna. Which brings me to the next point. The money in the Middle East, unfortunately, at this point, for you guys, has 4 problems. It's slow, meaning that it takes forever to get these deals done. There's all these restrictions. They want preferred shares. That means it has strings attached. It's brick and mortar, so it's a real estate guy trying to do tech investments. And then it's not smart. And I don't mean that the people aren't smart. I just mean that here, when you take money from Salim, it's not about the $10, $50, or $100,000. It's about him having the network and actually putting in time and investing his energy, which is much more valuable than his money. So what I call it is that the ecosystem in the Middle East is self-sabotaging itself. And whose fault is it? Well, what's happening now is I've been there 9 times, and I've met a ton of companies, and a ton of incubators, a ton of funds. What's happening is that bad terms are being given to the entrepreneurs, meaning that it's harder to raise follow-up money. The angels aren't involved. They want to be behind the scenes, which I guess is okay if they're putting in money, but it doesn't really push the business forward. And then there's these artificial valuations, which are government or program mandates that are put in place to make it seem like these companies are doing well, which then basically closes the door on them raising further money. Finally, the 2.7 mentality. If we talk about Web 2.0, those days have passed, and things are moving much faster now. So the example I did is I met a maybe 50-year-old gentleman at Startup Weekend in Dubai, and we're in the bathroom. He says hello, I said hello. What are you working on? He's like, I'm working on Irhad, which is to go away. It's a Muslim travel website. So halal restaurants, mosques, prayer times, anything having to do with people who are Muslim traveling. I said, that's pretty cool. He's like, yeah, I have a database of 100 cities, 250,000 users, and I'm selling banner ads, $8,000 in banner ads. I say, well, that's great. Unfortunately, database and banner ads are not business models, and they're not sexy. And unfortunately, I don't think you'll be able to raise money for it. He's like, well, I've put in $500,000 of my own money. So I kept thinking about this, and I kept thinking about it, and I'm like, wait a second. So what he has is Yelp meets TripAdvisor meets Pinterest, right? So Irhad, the world's largest community of Muslim travelers, who by sharing their experience, improve the experience of the next traveler. So I told him, he's like, no, it's not it. Okay. So an hour before the pitch competition, he comes to me, he's like, I think you're right, I'm gonna pitch it. So he got second place, and the only reason he got second place was because the winning team was Emirati, and it had to be an Emirati team to win because the son of the sheikh was there. But the bottom line was that he comes up to me afterwards, and he says, you know, I want to tell you something. I said, what? He's like, well, when you said banner ads were not a revenue model, it hurt my feelings. I said, why is that? He's like, well, I was head of advertising sales for Yahoo for the Middle East for 10 years. That's all I've ever done is sell banner ads. I said, cool. I'm like, by the way, where did you come up with these 100 cities? He's like, well, it's where Emirates flies to. I'm like, that's interesting. And so he says, as I'm leaving, he says, by the way, I've been working on this for 2 years. I've put in $500,000, and I never once thought of it the way you did after hearing my talk for 10 minutes. And that's what I call the 2.0 mentality is now 2.7. You have to be able to connect the dots at a higher, much quicker level. So for also the last piece is there's a lack of TCS, which is transparency, collaboration, and syndication. And that concept is not there yet. Here in the Valley, we have this, let's call it a gentleman's agreement or honor code, where I've heard probably 3,000 pitches, I've never signed an NDA, and I've never really shared secrets with somebody else. The issue in the Middle East is I think still people have gotten burned, and so there's this lack of trust. Just really quickly, market opportunities. 1% of content in the world is in Arabic. E-commerce in the Middle East is at 9 billion. Payments, again, nothing. So the whole point of this is that there's tons of opportunity. Just to put it in perspective, I want to go back here. Investments, about 100 deals done, venture deals, as Bruce mentioned, $200 million. Just to put it in perspective, it takes Amazon 58 days to sell the equivalent as the entire MENA region to 400 million people. 58 days. It's one company in the US doing the equivalent of the entire region. So the S word, anybody know what that is? Social entrepreneur. So when you walk in somewhere and you say you're a social entrepreneur, people are like, oh, that's great. You're trying to change the world? Well, yeah. Why wouldn't you want to change the world? And maybe you're just trying to change the world for yourself. I mean, that's ultimately what you're trying to do, have an impact for yourself and the people around you. There's an interesting fact. What happens to populations that are, when half the population is under 35 and unemployment is 25%? Well, revolutions, terrorism, unrest, unhappiness, civil unrest. So the question is, how, as a social entrepreneur, how much money do you really need to create jobs and economic development? And so the average GDP per person in the Middle East is 14,000. That number is skewed because Qatar it's 100,000 and then it drops down to like 40, so it's technically less than that. But the point is, where's the money? Well, $170 million of it is in Barcelona through a sponsorship. So technically, that $170 million on top of the $880 million in Khalifa Fund and the $10 billion endowment of cows to promote education entrepreneurship could fund, I think, everybody in the Middle East and create jobs. By the way, there is a need for 100 million jobs in the next 10 years in the Middle East. And so these organizations, as great as they are self-sabotaging. Khalifa Fund will give you basically free money if all the founders of a company are Emirati. What does that mean? Well, when the entrepreneurs aren't educated enough to build and understand how to scale a company and build a company, they hire people like Booz and McKinsey and consultants that are charging $500, $600, and basically the money goes to waste, and it's a mandate. We've distributed the money, but they haven't really built value. So here's the good news. The investment opportunity. Number of deals should be 10 times higher because the cost of building is 5 to 8 times lower, valuations are lower, and in reality, what that means is there's no need for $1 billion business, maybe $100 million, and you can have the same returns. So this is the good news. Only 100 deals done, lots of room for growth. Here's just a couple kind of verticals, crowdfunding. Abdullah is trying to do that in Beirut. So e-commerce, there's no dominant player. Payments, the growth by 2015 is $6 billion. And again, that's nothing. Service industries, anything, TaskRabbit, Odes, Elance, all these businesses should work even better in the Middle East because labor is low. Gaming, KSA has one of the highest ARPUs on the planet, which means, again, people are spending money, and so there are clients, there's customers. So if someone fixes the payment issue and the infrastructure, customers are definitely there. So I have met 510 companies in the last 9 months traveling the Middle East, and only 5 of them had any official connection to the US. Investor, board member, advisor. And that's the issue. I think it's disconnect. So you guys, the best piece of advice I can give you is get someone connected to you officially, as an advisor, as a board member, whatever it is, and that person will be your person on the ground here, and maybe ask them for an hour a month or something just to start with. Have a personal connection. Government support is great. Unfortunately, I was just in Beirut, and when Beirut Digital District real estate developers are talking about helping startups, that always sends the, like, me and like, what's going on here? This isn't going to work. But the success and these experiences need to trickle down. So you're here to learn and to be immersed. Go home, inspire other people, and share what you've learned. And again, the whole idea of what I'm trying to do is peace through technology, because I think economic development, as Mona mentioned, is the key to peace, because I think if you're building something cool and you're employed and you can feed your family, then realistically you're not going to start wars and become unhappy. So with that, thank you very much. Hassan's going to join us, I think, really quickly. So Hassan is an interesting story. He took the right approach as far as starting an angel group and an incubator accelerator program in Bahrain by getting the money first through a personal experience. So I'll let him tell you about that a little bit.
So I'm aware that you should be leaving now, so I'm going to be keeping this quite quick. My name's Hassan Haidar. I'm just going to tell you about my story about how I started something where there was nothing, which maybe some of you guys are going to relate to it. I studied economics, worked in an investment bank, and then realized that that's not really what I wanted to do with my life. I started my own startup, which was Netflix for Bahrain. I made a lot of mistakes, many mistakes, that if I had an hour, I could sit and talk to you about those for a while. But one of the things that really I discovered is I needed more money after the end of making all those mistakes. In the Middle East as a whole, what you see is there's a big push towards go and take a loan, here's debt funding, here's all the banks are going to give you money. That's not the best way to start a business or a startup. I did that. I actually took a loan, and I realized that after taking the loan that this wasn't a good idea. So then I started to read about more, and so I started to approach the venture capitalists that were active in the Middle East, and this was in 2008, 2009. There were only 5 of them. I went to them, and they said, sorry, you're still too early. Actually, only 3 of them are actively investing, and 2 of them are just their name, not in spirit. So then I realized I needed to go one step back and find angel investors. And I had no idea what angel investors were because I had no access and no exposure to that. I started reading quite a bit. Paul Graham's essays were amazing when he was setting up Y Combinator, so I read through all of that. And then decided, okay, that's quite cool, let me start approaching families. So I realized that we don't have angel investors, but we have big family groups who individually would be interested in investing in businesses that they're actually interested in. So I went to a couple of the family groups, and one of the first guys I went to, he's like, listen, you don't need any more money. I'm like, what do you mean I don't need more money? I do need more money. He's like, you don't need any more money. He's like, come in and I'm going to give you some help. So I, okay, this is going to be pretty useless, waste of time. What am I going to do? So I went in, and we were generating quite a bit of money. We were generating about $13,000 in revenues per month, but we were spending all of that in the same month. He's like, look, you don't need this. You don't need more money. No, I do. He's like, cut this out, cut that out, cut this expense, cut that expense, and you'll be fine. I'm like, no, I can't. I need it for running my business. He's like, no, you'll be fine. So just listen to me. I'm like, okay, fine. I actually listened to him, and we were running the same business, same operation, same everything. Instead of spending $13,000 per month, we were spending $3,000 per month. So that's the value of advice of someone who's been through it and who can tell you what's important and what's not. I didn't have that. I had no idea how valuable it would be until I saw that actually with my own eyes. So he became my mentor, and he's like, I'm not going to give you money, I'm still not going to invest in you, but I'll give you advice every 2 weeks, you know, come in. And he used to call me in, see how the business is going, and see how all my misadventures with venture capitalists and the other families I went to and things like that. Actually, it happened 3 times. I went to 3 different families, and they said, okay, I will invest. I love your idea. You're a very nice guy. I'll give you $300,000 for you to expand your business, to continue and to develop. I'm like, amazing. Call the guy up, email, message, leave messages in the office, and the guy just disappeared. Doesn't exist anymore in the world. So then what happened? That happened to me 3 times. Not once, not twice, 3 times. So I'm like, okay, this is not working. So in one of the mentorship sessions, which our chairman, who currently is the head of the Angel Group, he said, you know, why are you finding it so difficult? If you were in the US, you would have been able to raise millions of dollars, and you would have been very successful. I'm like, yeah, it's called Netflix, and they're worth about $4 billion, so it already exists. I mean, that's what happened. He's like, what's missing? I said, okay, we need angel investors. Like you've given me advice. If you came in earlier, I wouldn't have needed any more money, because when I started with about $130,000. If I hadn't made mistakes I did, then I would have been fine. I'm like, we need angel investors who are willing to put in their time, their effort, as well as help, basically, and invest as well. He's like, okay, tell me about this. So I told him, explained to him the model and what angel investors do and all of that. And by the end of that meeting, he's like, okay, let's do that. So I got buy-in from one person to set up something that didn't exist. So he went to his friends and network and people that he talked to. He's like, listen, just put in some money, you know, help these guys out. You want to help Bahrainis and things. So the whole idea was that they put in the money more from a CSR perspective more than anything else. I'm like, I'll take the money however I get it. That's fine. So what we did is we also realized that because of the issues that I faced while I was raising funding, and because Sami, he comes from the investor's background, he knows how they think. He's like, if you go to them like a normal angel group and have once a month a dinner and have someone pitch, none of them are going to invest. They'll sit, they'll have the meal, and they won't write a check. Or they'll write a check after a year, after talking to you, and you'll find it difficult to track them. So he's like, you need to get their money up front. So how are we going to do it? Just put it into an account. Tell them you want to be an angel investor, put your money where your mouth is, and put it in this account. So we managed to raise about $3 million that way. We got 16 investors involved. We actually got the support of the government, not explicit support, but implicit support. We got some semi-governmental entities as investors and supporters and partners and things. And so that was how we did it. So rather than people writing a check from their own pocket, they were saying, okay, the money's already there. I'll invest from that pool. It's everyone's money. It's not mine, so I'm not worried about it. The other thing that we did differently was we tied it in so that we knew, I mean, here in the US, someone that has succeeded, they're successful, they have more time on their hands, they've already sold their business, they're waiting to go into the next venture, so they want to mentor, they want to advise, they want to help. In the Middle East, and in Bahrain in particular, the more successful you get, the bigger a business person you are, the more boards you're involved with, the more the government drags you into things, so the less time you have actually, then more time. So we wanted the mentorship, we wanted the advice of the entrepreneurs, but we had to find a way to get it that worked for them and worked for us. So we said, all right, we'll take Y Combinator's model, but we'll adjust it. So we won't call it an accelerator program, we'll call it a mentorship program. And so we got the investors themselves to commit not only their money, but their time. 2 hours every 6 months, which is, they can do it. But because we have 14 investors, that 2 hours from 14 different investors, 2 semi-governmental entities, adds up to about 30 to 40 hours, which is quite a bit of mentorship. And it provides a lot of network and access to the entrepreneurs, to the people who are already in business, who have relationships, connections, businesses that can help. So it plugs them into an ecosystem that already exists, rather than trying to develop a new one ourselves. Like, oh, let's go find angel investors, let's go find VCs. Let's go. We don't have that, so let's plug into what's there. So the mentorship program, that's how we got the investors involved. They mentor the entrepreneurs. They see the development of the entrepreneurs with their own eyes. And the angel network aspect of it is that they're all there because they're looking at these businesses, and they make the decisions to invest. So rather than me saying, I've taken your money, I'm going to decide to invest, I say, I've taken your money, but you're still going to be the one that makes the decision. So they interact with the entrepreneurs from the first stage. They see who's coming, who's not coming, and see all the interest that's being generated. So they actually see the entrepreneurs develop from the first time that they come to present to us until they've been funded, they started the mentorship program, and they've developed, so they're there and see them that way. And then on a personal basis, any of the investors that would like to invest can then go and invest that way. So we trick them into becoming angel investors, really, more than anything else. But the thing is that we started something and we built block by block to see something that didn't exist before. And now we have an angel group. People know what angel investment is in Bahrain, which 2 years ago they didn't. No one had any idea what we were saying. The Arabic translation to angel investor still doesn't work, and we have to find a different word. But yeah, so it's pretty much, you can do whatever you want to do as long as you get one person to sort of support you. He'll help, bring someone else on board, and develop a network of people who are interested in seeing you succeed. And it's all about building a network and building people who have an interest in seeing you succeed. So we have the investors, we have the government involved, but we also went and started developing relationships with private sector companies. So our mentorship programs includes sessions from people, Ernst & Young, Microsoft, Bithuko, which is one of the biggest telecommunication providers in Bahrain. They provide advice on HR, accounting and finance, and all these sort of things. So we got the private sector involved and interested in seeing these companies succeed as well. So we made everyone sort of help and see these businesses. So, like I said, initially they all put in money. They're like, oh, my friend's putting in money, I'll put in as well, or I want to help Bahrainis, and that's how we're going to work out. But now they've seen some of the businesses grow, develop, generate income, really build something out of nothing. And now they're asking me, you know, this is interesting. What else do you have? So that's how we got them, but we got them in a different way. I mean, if we start to do just a normal network, an angel network or an angel fund or anything the way that it's done here or the way it's done in Europe, it wouldn't have worked. But because we knew the mentality, so Sami, Jalal, our chairman, he knew the mentality of the investors, he's on boards with them, and he knows how they think. I know how entrepreneurs think because that's my background. So we came together and we've made something that fit for our region and fit for Bahrain. So that's pretty much my story. Some of the other things that might help you. I try to get things done no matter how it's going to get done. So one of the things that we don't have is we don't have an incubator. Well, we have some incubator centers in Bahrain, but we don't have a technology incubator which really provides extra services rather than just office space discounted. So I decided to do that with participation from the existing incubator guys. So we didn't go in competition with them, we actually got them on board, so they have that interest in seeing it succeed. But I knew that if I went to people and said, okay, this is going to be a commercial venture, we're going to make money, they're like, how are we going to make money? You're going to need hundreds of people to come in. So I decided, okay, we'll shift focus, we'll do it as a social business. So that allows us to get grants for the first 3 years of the operation of the incubator, which actually would help us get started. And then eventually the business would be self-sufficient, so we wouldn't need grants or charity or donations from anyone else. So
How?
Because
you start charging?
Because the income from the rental and the space and things, it'll take 2-3 years for it to build up, but eventually that'll cover our expenses. As long as we're lean, we're very efficient with where our money is going, and we don't waste anything. The best way to structure a social enterprise is to turn it into social business. I mean, it's a new thing that Mohammed Yunus has come up with, social business, but it makes sense. So run it as a business. So you have income, you have expenses. Whether your income's from charity at the beginning and then later on it becomes actually a self-sufficient business or not. But that's the best way that I've found to actually set up a social enterprise. That way you're not dependent on grants every year. Maybe a foreign government just decides one day to cut off your funding, things like that. So that way you're self-sufficient. You find ways to actually cover your expenses and operate without having to rely on anyone else. So take the grant as your seed capital, but then run it in a way that would make it self-sustaining after a while. So that's one of the things, that's how we're doing our incubator. And we're getting quite a lot of funding because we did it as a social business rather than as a for-profit enterprise.
Because also this is the time to do it, right? When social entrepreneurship is on people's radar.
Entrepreneurship in general, everyone's just, in the Middle East, I mean, Nima said 100 million jobs in 10 years. There's no way that it's going to achieve that unless real businesses are created. I mean, since the 1970s, all net job creation here in the U.S. has been from startup businesses.
But real sustainable businesses, the ones that last.
Startups, basically. You can look at there's a saying, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. So you can make the numbers say whatever you want them to say. So that's pretty much it. That's my story, and that's what we've done.
Thank you. Can we have all three speakers on the floor so we can open for questions? So, if you have questions, please raise your hand and I will bring them up.
Thank you all for your stories, really fascinating stuff. For some of us in this room, though, one of you alluded to the fact that not all of our ventures have any sense to turn profit. I mean, we do want to change the world, but there isn't a built-in profit for some of these things. I wonder, on this side of the investing, this kind of this angel sort of things that is new to us, is there like a philanthropic sort of component to this? Is there sort of are there companies or portions of these companies that see the value in sort of some of the more not charity, but things that are being done that won't necessarily turn a profit, but can actually make a huge difference?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that difficult, basically. You just have to find the right people who are willing to give you the money. But you have to structure it in such a way so that it doesn't always rely on them giving you money on and on and on and on, because people get fed up with that.
Sure.
And it's not sufficient for you. It's not efficient for you either, because what you want to do is have your own entity running by itself. So the model that you go, there's a lot of people out there, philanthropists, there's foundations, there's trusts, there's grants, there's a lot of things that you can use to actually get funded at the beginning for a social business. But the way that you should structure it should go down the path of looking at your expenses, your cash flows, and seeing where you can actually generate revenues to cover those expenses. Whatever your entity is, whatever you're trying to do, there should be some way that you can actually try to do something.
I think what you're trying to say, though, is that if you there will never be a return for an investor. It's not like you can go say, okay, well, give me the money.
Sure.
I think in this case, human capital is the way to go, and building a community that just believes in you or your vision or what you're trying to do. At the end of the day, I mean, now there's crowdfunding and other tools that you can use, and I think what needs to go with social entrepreneurship is the social movement behind it. So I think if you can get people around the world to support you with time, effort, outreach, buzz, writing, whatever that is, then eventually I think you'll get someone's attention. And there are tons of nonprofits, NGOs that have millions and millions of dollars set away to support these kinds of things. But it's not that easy to get your foot in the door. So if you create social movement behind your cause, then I think you have a better chance of kind of connecting with the right person who can potentially give you a grant or money to support your effort. Because you're right, investor, they're going to say, well, it's not an investment.
So you do have a profit, it's just a social profit versus monetary
something
profit.
comes out of it, there's not money.
Right, and so you just need sustainability for your operations. I'm also in conversations in all my free time with the folks who built Grameen Bank, and they're looking at creating a new royalty-based structure. So rather than because if you get charitable funding from philanthropy, it's usually a one-time thing. You get the money, you spend it. But they're looking for a more sustainable royalty-based system. So maybe we can come back next year and talk to you about that.
So my question is to Jean and Pippi. I live in Israel, my name's Agal, and your description was very interesting and pointed to a lot of things that I've heard about, but living in Israel, that is the exact opposite of what I grew up in. And my interest would be to hear what you have to say about opportunities of utilizing that community and the opportunities that are served there to people living literally next door.
Yeah, so the best example I've heard in the last couple of years is Singularity University is doing this project called No Borders. And the idea was that they had a pitch competition where a Palestinian and an Israeli kid got together, and they basically built a platform that was building projects where half the team had to be Israeli, half the team had to be Palestinian, half the money had to be Israeli, half the money had to be Palestinian. So the point is, I mean, the beauty of Israel is that the entrepreneurs are educated, they're connected to the US, they think big, and so the ecosystem, it works, you know, at the end of the day. And then you go to Lebanon or Jordan or Egypt or Palestine, which, like you said, is next door, and that fluidity isn't there. And I think it comes back to the level of sophistication of the investors, because they are brick and mortar. A lot of the investors that are investing in Israel now have had exits here, and they're familiar with tech. And then again, it's less even about the money, it's about them pushing you to the next level by introductions and connections. So I think the model technically should work anywhere. And so one of the things that we're going to be focusing on is educating investors in the Middle East. So I think that's the key. The entrepreneurs need to learn, but the investors, they have to start diversifying their portfolio and understanding what it means to do a seed investment.
Thanks for your presentations. I was struck by what you said about how so few of the startups that you met have any relationship to the United States. And this is one of the things that we're trying to do. I work with a lot of startups, and just sort of by nature, I guess, of being Tunisian American, they all come up to me and they're like, hey, like, can you put me in touch with somebody in the US, or like, how can I expand my, my market or my operations to the US? And it's hard to answer those questions a lot of times because it's a startup. So you don't know exactly what they're planning on doing or what they want to do in order to be able to know who to contact. So I don't know if you have any advice about how to sort of bridge these gaps, because the Chamber of Commerce isn't really doing what it's supposed to do, and it's like a young IT startup, so you can't really like bring them to the Chamber of Commerce and like, So do you have any advice about how to facilitate those connections?
I'm going to pick on Ali a little bit. So Ali and I met when I first came to Beirut for Startup Weekend, I think 9 months ago. And I was in Beirut a couple weeks ago, and before I was going to Beirut, he mentioned that he's coming here. And I'm like, Ali, how can I help you? And who would you like to connect with? And so he said, Mark Zuckerberg. And so that's, I think, there's this issue of kind of looking at Silicon Valley or tech entrepreneurs as like Hollywood. And even if I wanted to, I can't connect them with Mark Zuckerberg, which wouldn't even be valuable to him. Yeah, it would be cool. But there are people who you need to connect with on a personal level, who believe in you and what you're trying to do. What Ali's trying to do is awesome, and I could think of a ton of people that he's never heard of that could spend half an hour with him and actually further his business. Kind of who was talking when Osama was talking about Hind and the butterfly glasses. Same thing. It's not about meeting glamorous people or even people who've been really successful. It's people who want to contribute and give back and who actually care. You know what I mean? So make social, personal connections. Even if the person isn't an expert in the field, then just if you believe or like someone, you're going to help them. Yeah. And that's the bottom line, no matter what they're doing.
I want to add also, there's a new site called Mentor Cloud, and so you might want to check it out. I know they're relatively young, but that's their purpose. And I know Stanford's a client, and they've signed up many others, but maybe there's a way to create your own network through that. And then also call Nima, he knows everybody. He'll hook you up.
Not Mark Zuckerberg.
Thank you very much for your presentation and also answering questions.